Hey, welcome to the live stream. Today we're focused on government jobs. If you have a question, go ahead and drop it in the chat and I'm going to try to get to it. We got some previously submitted questions, but first and foremost, we have to talk about the biggest news that we're seeing today, and that's the government shutdown. In less than 2 days, the government could potentially shut down. Now, we've heard this before. Pretty much every year there's a discussion about it, but this time seems really likely. Polymarket, which is where people are betting on the odds, Polymarket has a 70% likelihood, a 70% chance that the government shuts down. So, what is the impact of that? Well, the impact would be first, you would see roughly 700,000 federal workers furloughed. So, they would not be coming into work, they would not be getting paid. When the government resumes, they would receive a paycheck. Then you have the federal workers who are exempted and they have to. They're essential employees. They have to continue to work even though they're not getting paid. Then when the government resumes, they would be getting paid. Now, most Americans wouldn't really notice a difference. You could see some government websites that are not updated. Maybe they're not even live. That could be an indicator. You could also see parks closed down, monuments closed down. A lot of tourist attractions, people come to the country, they want to see the national park, they want to go to Yellowstone or, pick your favorite national park. That could be closed or it could be long lines there. What would be the real impact, though, is if it were closed for multiple weeks. Because if it were closed for multiple weeks, then what you would see is you would have local economies impacted because the federal workers, they wouldn't be spending their money because they would be trying to hoard their money. Whatever savings that they have, they would be clinging on to it because they don't know when they're going to get paid. So people are not going to be spending money as much in restaurants or cafes or dry cleaners, places like that. So you would see impact there. You would also see an impact when it comes to federal funding. So regardless of what state you live in this country, your state receives federal funding. Now, all these grants that go out, they would be in limbo unless they were already approved through the process. If you had a grant that was, in the process of getting done, that would be held. There would be no progress on that. So that could be an impact as well. Also, you would see an impact when it comes to contractors. So after 2, 3, 4 weeks, maybe contractors, they're not going to get paid, or maybe they could even be let go. They could be laid off if it extends for a long period of time. Now, going back to, is it going to happen? What we know right now is we have the top four lawmakers are going to meet President Trump tomorrow, Monday. They're all going to meet. You're going to have the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer's going to be there. You're going to have, you know, the four top guys are going to try to hash through it. This is going to be like a last ditch effort to try to get something through. Why are we having problems right now? Well, if you ask the Republicans, the Democrats, they have some demands. The main demand is the Affordable Care Act, premium subsidies. So, people who get Affordable Care Act, roughly in our country, I would say that's about 5%, about 15 million people. They benefit from the premium subsidies of the Affordable Care Act. These are people that do not receive insurance through an employer. So federal employees, generally speaking, largely do not have to involve themselves in premium subsidies. They receive health care through their employer. But if you're working a retail job, a minimum wage job that does not provide health care, then it would apply to you. Now, the Republicans are saying that this is being used for illegal immigrants. They're using and abusing the system. This premium subsidies, it costs $100 billion a year. So that's what they're asking. Democrats are asking for an additional year. If they do not receive that, then the premium subsidies expire December 31st. There would be no more. And this would mean that if you rely upon the Affordable Care Act, if you rely upon the premium subsidies, your premiums would go up 200 to 300%. So 2 to 3 times more than you currently pay. That's how much it would go up. But a lot of people, like I said, 95% of Americans, they don't use that. This is creating the contention. Now, the Republicans, they want a CR to go out 7 weeks. That's what they want. So what's going to happen? What we saw in March, it was a typical scenario. The Democrats, they folded up. Chuck Schumer, he agreed to everything. Now, Chuck Schumer is under immense pressure to fight back. The people who fund political campaigns for the Democrat side, they want to see some sort of fight. They want to see a pushback. Stop laying over. But the pushback, that involves potentially having the government shut down. Now, what we heard from OMB and from the Trump administration is they're trying to tie additional mass layoffs to the fact that we might have a government shutdown. Now, having a government shutdown doesn't provide any additional legal authority to do mass rifts. That's not how it works. But that's what we're seeing. And what's the feasibility of this? Well, if you just pay attention to what happened earlier, we saw mass reduction in forces, and then we saw agencies like GSA, IRS, HHS, they started rescinding their reduction in force notices because they realized they actually needed those people within the agency. They couldn't just cut a huge chunk without having some repercussions. So they needed some of their talent back. They needed to be staffed up at a higher level than they thought previously. So seeing that take place throughout the course of 2025 and then threatening additional rifts, to a lot of people, it sounds somewhat hollow. Because if you're calling people back already and you're trying to restaff already, how is there room or appetite for additional layoffs? And not just that, how are they going to conduct a RIF study in less than a week? So the RIF process takes a few months, 2 or 3 months. It cannot be done in less than a week unless you're just, picking names out of a hat and you're just go cut 10%, cut 15%, make it happen. Unless you're doing that. If you're doing a thoughtful, deliberate study on your workforce and you're actually trying to deliberately do workforce planning and identify positions that are no longer needed, you can't just do it in a knee-jerk reaction, or that's not the way it was intended. But to a lot of people, it seems like the Trump administration is using this as an intimidation technique or a negotiation technique in order to pressure Chuck Schumer and the rest of the Democrats in the Senate in order to go along and do the same thing that the Democrats did in March. In March, when the Democrats, folded up and they agreed to compromise and just take whatever the Republicans were saying, a lot of people were upset. A lot of people that were upset. And now a lot of Democrats are believing that this is the right political climate in order to take a stand, even if it means a government shutdown. And then you have some Democrats that are willing to break the line from Chuck Schumer. They're not going to just follow Chuck Schumer blindly. They're willing to break off from the rest of the party in order to cut a deal, in order to make sure that the government is still funded and everything continues. So that's a big mess. And we're going to see the next bit of news probably that has to do with the government shutdown will come out either Monday morning or Monday early afternoon once the top 4 lawmakers have met with the president. But I really don't see the Republicans budging on this. They do not want to renew the premium subsidies when it comes to the Affordable Care Act, which is known as Obamacare. The reason why that extra money was added in, it was in 2022 under the Inflation Reduction Act. And really, the Inflation Reduction Act didn't really do much to reduce inflation, but it did add those premium subsidies that are now expiring. So that's the big deal there. In addition to that, we have, if you notice, if you went on usajobs.gov recently, you saw pretty much all the job announcements were pulled down. Something like 90% of the job announcements that were there 2 weeks ago, they're gone. So I did a live stream last month. A lot of you guys were with me last month. I did a live stream, and there was close to 7,000 open jobs for that were open to the public. Right now, there's about 200 and something. There's like 290. So it's a huge drop. And the reason for that is what they want to do is they want to standardize all of these job announcements with the right language. So 2-page resume, that became official yesterday. All resumes need to be 2 pages. Not just what I wouldn't do, and what I've heard people talk about is I'm just going to have a 3-page resume, and then HR is only going to look at the first 2 pages, so I'm going to be good. I wouldn't go into it with that mindset, because there's a lot of people in HR, once they see that you didn't meet the standard, or you refuse to follow instructions, they'll just discard your application completely. So make sure if you're applying, 2 pages, not one character over the 2 page limit. And then if there's a government shutdown, that's going to change everything up. But if by some miracle they're able to resolve their differences tomorrow and the government doesn't shut down, we're still looking at October 16th for the lifting of the hiring freeze. The hiring freeze goes out to October 15th, and then the 16th is the very next day. And then hopefully we'll see some positions on there for the people that are still trying to get a government job. All right, so let me answer some of the questions that were previously submitted. The first one here, what is this? Okay, so we got, maybe that's not it. I'm jumping ahead. Okay, let me get to the right button. There we go. All right, Tracy asks, do you think telework will ever come back for VBA, or have there been any talk about it? So yeah, right now, for most federal agencies, there's 2 categories of people that should still be allowed to telework. Number one are the individuals that have reasonable accommodations. They're disabled and they submitted all their support and documentation through their agency, and they got an approved reasonable accommodations, and they're able to work from home. That's number one. Now, we saw some agencies try to take that away. GSA, I think, was the latest. Not GSA, I'm talking about CDC. CDC under HHS. They try to take that away and say this is no longer a reasonable accommodation, which is ridiculous. They backpedaled on that. They were like, oh, wait, no, we didn't mean that. Actually, you can go ahead and do it. Even if that's you right now trying to submit that document, there's a huge backlog on reasonable accommodations. And honestly, it's not a priority for most HR offices. The second one is military spouses. It's not all of them. It's some military spouses. They have been allowed to telework. And some of the VA workers, like if you look at the veteran crisis line, some of those workers are able to work from home as well. But what you saw prior to 2025, so if you go last year, you're not going to see that type of an environment. It's not going to be that climate where most people are able to telework at least a couple of days out of the week. We're not going back there for at least the next few years. So for the next few years, it might get a little bit better depending on your agency, because I do know some supervisors that are allowing some of their workers to periodically telework situationally. Like, hey, you have something going on that's important, write up a reason, the justification on why you need it, and they allow situational telework. But I don't see it going back to how you recall it. If you were a federal worker in 2024, I don't see it going back that way. And there's an interesting interview that took place, I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago, with the leader of the OPM, Scott, and he was talking about the return to office mandate. So I'm going to get a little bit more into that interview because it's interesting. Not just that, but he's talking about younger people not being attracted into the federal workforce, and he's wondering why. And it's really not that hard to understand why, but we'll get into that in a little bit. All right, so the next one is Retro Gamer, who says, what do you think about the new memo that is stating a shutdown occurs, they'll do mass layoffs? Do you think, from your perspective, that is permissible? I don't think so, but I don't think that's going to stop that's not going to stop anybody. Here, I'm going to show you the memo if you haven't seen it. It looks like this. So this is the memo, and is that zoomed up enough? I think that's zoomed up enough. Okay, so this is essentially the memo from OMB. And where is it? And this was sent out to all secretaries, all department secretaries. So at the front, it basically gives you the situation on the CRs and what's happening. I highlighted this part right here. It says they're going to use this opportunity to consider RIF notices for all employees in programs, projects, and activities that meet one of the 3 conditions. Number 1 is discretionary funding lapses on October 1st. Hey, the deal is all federal worker positions are funded by discretionary funds. The same thing with the military. It's all discretionary funds. Number 2 is another source of funding. So that's like the big, beautiful bill. If there's funding that is linked to the big, beautiful bill, then it's going to be fine. The third one is not consistent with the president's priorities, which can mean a whole bunch of different things. Now, it also tells agencies that they cannot use transfer authorities. So they cannot use any way in order to get funding. You just don't have the funding. Don't even try it. And then at the end here, it says, we remain hopeful that Democrats in Congress will not trigger a shutdown. This is Republicans blaming it on the Democrats. And then it says the steps outlined above will not be necessary if the shutdown is not triggered. So they're using this as like an ultimatum. They're using this as a negotiation technique. Like if you listen to us, we won't have to do this. And then they're trying to paint the portrait that if there is a government shutdown and federal workers lose their jobs, then the finger is pointed at the Democrats, pretty much. Okay. So no, I don't. I think that it could be legally challenged. And then what happens if it gets elevated all the way to the Supreme Court? Supreme Court has been favoring the President Trump lately. So, I mean, it doesn't look good. All right. The next one is ASD. What about the on hold job offers during the hiring freeze, right? Yeah, during the hiring freeze. Okay, so during a hiring freeze, job offers can be paused or they can be canceled. Now, if you're talking about a job offer from back in January when the first freeze took place, that job offer is likely canceled at this point. I wouldn't hold out any hopes that they're going to resume it. Now, what you should be doing is contacting the HR office. Whoever sent you that job offer, you need to go ask them for a situation report. What's the latest status? What's happening? Do I have to reapply? Are you going to publish the job announcement again? Give me some info. Give me some details. You need to talk to them. But I would assume that thing is canceled. Okay. All right. Let's see if we got anything in the chat. All right. Good morning. This guy gets it right here. Smash the like button. Okay. Appreciate you for that. Morning. Let's see. Sean Blake. Good morning. Okay. We have a question here from Mohammed. Hi, Armand. Why are agencies letting probationary employees who took DRP return but ignore those terminated in February and May who are now struggling to get federal jobs again? This is all really agency and office dependent. So some agencies and offices realize that they cut too deep and they sent out too many DRPs and they realize, we need to restaff. The problem is it's not as easy as just hiring somebody off the street. It's a long process. And it's not just the federal hiring process that could be multiple months. But once you get a fresh body, even if they're well educated, they're very skillful, they have a lot of experience, and they're maybe even in the government, but from another agency. You put them in a new office, they need to shadow somebody. They need to follow somebody around for a period of months, up to a year. There was one study that came out that said it takes like 2 years to be fully proficient in that role because there's a different culture, there's different acronyms, there's different systems, different processes. You have to learn, who's who in the zoo. You got to learn all of that stuff. So it takes time. So when you overcut and think that you can quickly rectify it by hiring somebody else, often that's not the answer. And you find out once you start having conversations with human resources, you find out it's not as simple as that. So what's the next easiest thing to do is to rescind the layoff notice or to ask people that took the deferred resignation program to politely come back, and hopefully they do, or a certain percentage of them do. So that's what's going on there. Okay, what else we have? All right. What is this? Okay, we have JJ. She is closing the government and the military permanently. Yeah, I don't know about that one. There was a time I was in the military. There was a shutdown. They were telling us that we were not going to get paid and we still had to come into work. We still had to put on our military uniform, report to our station, but to anticipate not getting paid. That never happened, but they wanted us to anticipate. This was during President Obama. A lot of people were getting disgruntled about that. When there is a government shutdown and people are not getting paid consistently, that also impacts retention. So, that's not something that's typically seen within the private sector, where as long as you're working and the company is profitable, even if they're not profitable, they're going to give you your check. And in the government, the concept of I'm continuing to work multiple weeks, but I'm getting nothing. That's kind of a novel concept for a lot of people. They don't like it, and they decide to jump out of this sector. Okay, what else? Good morning, Dana Cooper. Good morning. What else do we have? All right. What? Oh, we got TB. Good morning. We have a question here from JP. Do you offer services to help rewrite our resumes and help with those additional summaries for hiring? Yeah. So what? Just send me a message on LinkedIn, or you can email me. My email address should be at the in the video description, and then we can work something out where I can assist or I can help you with the edits or rewrite. But if you just want an example of how a resume should look, I adjusted some of the federal resume examples down below to fit the two-page format. So if you want to take a look at a strongly worded resume fitted towards a specific job series, you can look at the examples. There should be a link below in the video description. But if you're looking for more than an example, if you want me to actually put hands on it, then shoot me a message. Yeah. So Rex, does a two-page limit apply to the US Jobs Resume Builder? Yes. And the way that you know that you're meeting that limit, you hit print preview, and then you can tell exactly how many pages it is. Oftentimes on the USA Jobs Resume Builder, you can go ahead and get rid of all that fluff on the top. So on the top, if you put in the location of choice, or if you put in exactly what type of work you're looking for, like full-time, part-time, all of those filters, all those options, they're automatically populated in the first quarter of your resume. You can go to usajobs.gov, you can get rid of all that. Just unclick all of those filters and it'll save a lot of space. So check that out. All right, let's see. Yeah. Rex, I was just saying it, hit the print preview and then you can check exactly. And also, hey, if you want a step by step on that, look at my last live stream from last month. If you go to August live stream on my YouTube channel, I go through step by step on exactly what I just explained on how to check how many pages your resume is on the builder, and also how to delete all that fluff. I go through it step by step. If you go check out the channel, August live stream. Okay. What else do we have? Tyrone. If I have to get resume down to 2 pages, can I then have time break in my work experience? Yeah. So on your resume, really, you're putting down the experience that you're selecting that's relevant to the position you're applying to. So if you took some random job in between the one you have now and the one you had 6 years ago, and you don't want to mention it, you don't have to mention it. You're just putting down the experience that you know is directly relevant to it. So there can be a break in there. It's not like the private sector where it's highly frowned upon if you're having a break. You can have a break in there. It's not a problem. And for a lot of people with 2 pages, you're really only talking about your current position and your last position. You're not going to be going back 3, 4, 5, 6 positions because you just don't have the space for it. So yeah, okay. What else do we have? Oh, all right. This is an interesting question. Leonard says, is it too risky to take a promotion into a supervisory position that will put you in a probationary status in the DAF? So, what I would tell you with that is, if it were me and they offered me a promotion, I would take that promotion because that's what I would be looking for. I'd be like, okay, this is where I'm at now. This is how much I'm getting paid now. And I'm more receptive to challenges. Like if you want to challenge me, but you're going to pay me more, there's a reward to the challenge. I'm going to go ahead and try to make that happen. Now, the fact that you are on probation because you're accepting a supervisory position, because in the event that you fail to meet the expectations, that should not cost you your job. You won't be a supervisor anymore, but they should put you back into another position. So are you in the Air Force right now? If you're in the Air Force right now, you would lose a supervisory position, but they should put you back into a lower level position. They should not fire you from the federal government because you're not meeting the standard for supervisory. And that was something that we saw violated earlier this year, where some people that were on probationary status for different reasons. You had some people that were in the federal government for 20 years and they moved over to a different job and they were temporarily on probationary status. They shouldn't have lost their job either. And I think some agencies were rectifying that mistake because it was a mistake. So there's a difference between different types of probationary status. And the one that you're talking about is the supervisor one. So I wouldn't let that discourage you. So I would take it. Let's see. Okay, so you're moving from GS 12 to GS 13. Definitely, I would definitely take that. It's going to be it's a personal question depending on what you have going on in your situation right now. Yeah. What's this? Return to office is such a waste of resources. I'm doing the exact same level of work in the office as I did remotely at home. Now I'm wasting extra money on fuel for my car and wear and tear. Hey, it's not just that. I agree with you completely, but it's not just that. It's more than that because federal agencies, they provide a lot of their workers with transit benefits. So in the DC area, the agency can be responsible for up to $300 per person paying for their metro or their train ticket or their bus ticket. So they're coming out of pocket for that, which makes it less efficient. And in this one case, the agency was paying more to have a workstation for one person. Here, I'm going to use this opportunity to go ahead and share this article because I think this is crazy. This is ridiculous. Let me go ahead and share my screen really quick. Okay. Yeah. So check this out. You see this? This is Scott. This is the director of OPM. And down here, they're talking about it, right? So this one federal employee says his agency is paying $300 a month in transit and another $750. So the agency is coming out of pocket $1,000 a month. So the response from OPM was RTO was not designed to be a cost saving thing. RTO was not designed to be a cost savings thing. So that's the official response. And then the justifications right here. In order to do the work of the American people, people need to be able to collaborate and talk to one another, which is outrageous. This is like completely ignores the fact that you can talk to individuals through Zoom, Microsoft Teams, through a phone, through video calls, through any of it. But that's the official stance. And here's something else. Remember earlier I said that there's a very small percentage of people under 30 years old that actually work for the federal government? OPM realizes that's a problem because he says here, today, 7% of workers in the government are under 30. So we have a demographic that's not going to serve us well over time because we have a lot of people that are going to retire. And then the interviewer is like, well, is something turning them off or do they just not know? And then Scott goes, I think they just don't know. He means they don't know about the opportunity. He says we have completely fumbled on telling people the right message about why government is exciting. That's crazy, right? That's nuts. I'm not the only one who thinks that's nuts. Because talking about fumbling a message, the message is really clear to people that are considering a federal job in 2025, I think. So I thought that was crazy. I'm actually going to do a video on that tomorrow. But the message is unstable, hostile, toxic at times, right? That's the message. The message is, hey, we're going to threaten to do mass firings because we can't get a CR passed. The government's going to shut down, so we're going to use the federal workforce as pawns in order to push our agenda to force the Democrats to sign off on whatever we have to say. Now, there's another side of the coin where the Republicans are the majority in the Senate and the House. So yeah, that's understood. But at least have a dialogue. There was supposed to be a dialogue on Friday, and then the president just canceled the meeting. He's like, I'm not going to talk to these guys. It was the top Democrat in the House and the top Democrat in the Senate, Chuck Schumer. But he canceled the meeting. So at least have the conversation, at least talk about it. But it didn't seem like anybody was talking about it. That was the problem. Okay. But yeah, it is a waste of a lot. It is a waste of a lot. And there's like the statistics on remote work or working from home. In the private sector, you have roughly 20 million people that have the ability to work from home. 20 million in the private sector. And there's always this talk about let's make the public sector more like the private sector, right? So you could trust certain private sector employees with being at home and doing their task. And you could do the same thing for decades with the federal workforce, but now you can't. So it's a sudden shift and it impacts recruitment, especially when you want to recruit for IT talent. You want people that know how to do cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, that know how to program. You want these type of individuals that are coming fresh out of university And all the other companies that are trying to attract that talent, they have those benefits. They have work from home benefits. Do you not think that appeals to somebody in their mid 20s who wants to have more of their own life back? Do you think everybody wants to be chained to a desk in a building? Probably not. You're probably not going to do that well when it comes to recruitment or retention. All right. Let's see. What is this? This is you're talking about non-appropriated fund, NAF. Yeah, that should be, you should not be affected if you're NAF because the money comes from a different pot. Hoping federal employees and veterans remember this on November 7th. Midterm elections. Yeah, that's going to be huge. There'll be a lot of eyeballs watching that unfold, and that's going to really determine on how the public feels about the direction that we're going in. Okay. Did I miss anything else? All right. Key dates again. I'm going to go ahead and pop that up. Key dates. You got November 3rd, midterm elections, and then November 7th. Okay. All right. Let me get back to the previously submitted questions and see what else we got. Man, okay. Here we go. We have Retro Gamer. Why is USA Jobs shutting down all the job postings before the new 2-page resume takes effect? I find it suspicious that they're going to do that. It makes me wonder if they're really going to look at those old positions. Yeah. So they're trying to standardize all the job announcements. They should still look at all the old ones that closed out. But the thing with USA Jobs is you have a lot of positions, a lot of job announcements out there that are on like a roster, a 12-month roster, 9-month roster. You have public notice. And those things were posted like 4, 5, 6, 7 months ago, or even later. Those are some old job announcements that are just hanging around. So they want the new language included in all the job announcements, not just the two-page resume limit, but also speaking on the 4 essay questions. Now, here's an interesting thing with the 4 essay questions, right? Like, I think most people are aware of it by now. When you're submitting your job application, there's a lot of job announcements right now. When you go to the questionnaire, you're going to be prompted to fill in an answer for the 4 questions. One of them is, what's your favorite executive order? One of them is, how have you been efficient and effective in the past? And how are you going to bring it to this agency? So with those questions, the official information coming out is you don't have to answer them. But in some of those questionnaires, it will not let you continue to the next page unless you put something in that block. So some people have been putting NA, non-applicable. But I think if I were applying for a government job, I would fill it out. I don't think it takes that much effort. And once you fill it out, you can save your answer. So if you don't know who the hiring manager is going to be. That's the big problem here. Like if you're applying for the Department of War, if you're applying for a job over there, you don't know who the hiring manager is going to be. You might have somebody who values the answer to those questions. And if you just put non-applicable, you're taking yourself out of contention. If you want to give yourself the best shot, I would answer the question. That was like a big point of argument, a big point of contention of, should you answer the question or shouldn't you answer the question? My perspective is, if you're trying to apply and the question is presented on the questionnaire, you're doing yourself the best probability. You're trying the utmost of your ability to fill it out, right? So I would fill it out. Now, some people don't want to fill it out, and that's fine because it is supposed to be optional. I just wouldn't take the risk. Next question. Inquiring minds want to know, how is there any hiring going on at all right now when the firings are still going on? So think about it like this. They're reducing the non-desirable jobs and they're increasing the desirable jobs. So what are the desirable jobs? Immigration enforcement, law enforcement, public safety, and national security. Those are the desirables. Undesirable is everything else. Not really everything else, because IT is still desirable. So, medical professionals are still desirable. So that's kind of a broad way to look at it. But there's a lot of positions that are just not priorities right now. Look at all the positions at the EPA, Department of Interior. There's a lot of positions they're just not going to hire for. So the ones that they're laying off or firing, most of them they're trying to lay them off or squeeze them out some other type of way. Those are positions that they're not trying to beef up. They're not trying to ramp those up. You see that when the government wants somebody, when the federal government wants to hire, they will flex their recruitment incentive. So they really want ICE, Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement. They're willing to give $50,000 a person if you meet the criteria, if you're willing to agree to it, if you can pass the academy. They're willing to give you $50,000. And the same could be said about some of the other positions that they're really trying to increase. So there is a type of federal worker that is highly desirable and they're going to throw money at. And then there's a lot of workers that are the opposite. So that's the best way to envision it. Okay, next question. Shannon Reed, I have a serious question. Is anyone else having a hard time with the 2-page resume? I had an 8-page resume, but the way it's formatted is still 5 pages. Any advice is much appreciated. You have to get to 2 pages. So what I would do is, first off, you can cut out the references if you have references. I wouldn't go too deep into some of your coursework. If you want, you can list the college degree and the major, but you don't have to go into the coursework. You don't have to go too deep into the awards. If you have military service, you don't have to go deep on that. You can take away a large portion of the top. If you're doing the resume builder, you can take a lot of that out, but you're going to have to get rid of some of the positions. And then you really want to just keep the highly relevant, quantifiable achievements. That's what you really want. Like a good story, right? What did you do? How did you do it? What was the result? You can follow situation, task, action, result, or context, action, result. You want a really good story because the resume is like a trailer. You're the full feature movie, but the resume is the trailer. It should be exciting, should be dynamic, it should be appealing. It makes people want to interview you. So you want to keep the exciting, relevant stuff there, and you want to strip away everything else. And it comes down to, you're going to have to get rid of good achievements. You have to get rid of good bullets because I'm sure you're going to have, some really good ones, but they're going to have to get sacrificed. You're going to have to get rid of them. And 8 pages ain't the worst of it. I've seen people that have had 10-page resumes, but you have to make it work. It has to be 2 pages. So keep cutting away until it's 2 pages. Like I told the other person that asked me this question, there's some federal resume examples down below in the links in the video description. So you can check that out. Maybe that could help you. Okay. All right. Good question. Let's see. Let me jump back into the chat, see what we got. Mohammed. Hi, Armand. Can a federal agency rescind a tentative job offer that was already accepted? The answer is yes. They can absolutely do that. If the start date is at the end of October due to a government shutdown, they can do it for any reason. Honestly, they don't really need a good reason. They can rescind a tentative job offer. In fact, there's some situations where they've rescinded a final job offer. A final job offer is more final, I would say. So you'd probably have a 99% chance. If you get a final job offer, there's like a 99% chance it's going to go through. But I wouldn't count it as your job until you're sitting in the seat. Literally, your bottom is in the seat. That's when the job is yours. But final job offer is really good. Tentative job offer, anything can happen. Maybe something comes back in your background check and they just cut you off right there. Anything could happen, honestly. So usually, last year when I was talking to more people, I was telling them, keep applying. Even once you get a tentative job offer, keep applying. Keep going on interviews. Don't reject interviews. Even if you have a job offer. There was a time I had a job offer. I had a couple of job offers and I was still going on interviews. And I was just, in my head, I was thinking, number one, this is more practice. Good for me. Maybe I can speak in public a little bit better. This is more for practice, but also this is like an insurance. This is like leverage that I have in case something falls through. Now, nothing fell through, but I would keep going on interviews if you're in that position. Next question. Mr. Amor. If a federal worker is a GS-9 and applies for a GS-13 open to the public job, but has all the qualifications to qualify for that role, should they still submit an SF-50 or leave it out completely? What a difficult question you just asked. So I'm going to tell you what I would do. I'm not saying that you should do it. If I were that person, I wouldn't attach my SF-50 because I think it would confuse the HR specialist. But according to OPM and according to a lot of people I talk to, it should be okay to attach your SF-50 because if they reject you, you're able to, you're able, I'm not going to say appeal, but you're able to reach out and say, hey, listen, I'm not doing this based off of my previous federal government job. I have experience in this position, this position, this position. These are the positions I'm using to qualify for that position. But what I've seen happen a lot of times is as soon as you upload the SF-50, HR is really quick to disqualify you. Like this guy's a GS9. What are you talking about? Apply for GS13. You don't meet time and grade. Get out of here. They're real quick to do that. So I would just leave it off. And you have to answer the question, are you a federal worker as well? So if it's open to the public, I would want them, if I were a GS9, I would want them to consider me as a regular, open to the public candidate, not as a federal worker. That's my take on it. Okay. But either way could work. It's a difficult question. I wouldn't do it personally. And I'm sure there's people that would say, well, you're wrong. You should be able to do it. So it's whatever. What else? Okay. Yeah, Mr. Jenk's on the same page as me. It's good. Your application will get tossed. No, so check this out, Mr. Jank and Mr. Amore. You can still qualify for the GS13. So this type of situation happens a lot. I'm gonna give you an example. Take a guy that was in the military for 20 years. He applies, he's scared, he wants to get a job, he accepts a GS7, he's working there for a couple of months. And then he realizes his buddy's a GS11. So then he starts applying for GS11 open to the public. He gets an interview, he gets a job offer. In that situation, your previous military experience would make you eligible for the GS11. This is all hypothetical. This is situation dependent. But let's just say this guy was in logistics for 20 years and he's trying to get a 0346 logistics position. So if his military experience backs up that he has the required experience to be eligible for a GS11, he can use his military experience. It doesn't matter that he's a GS7 right now because you're not applying as a federal employee. You're applying as open to the public. Yeah. What else? Yeah, that's another good point, Walter. Some of them do ask you if you're a federal worker to upload your SF-50, but a lot of them they don't. Ben Clark, can they legally lay people off during a shutdown? I think the consensus to that is no. But I don't think it matters what is legal at this point. With the question that you're answering, with the question that you're asking, it doesn't necessarily matter in the short term if it's legal or not. It'll be challenged. So you cannot, it's typically well understood, you cannot use a government shutdown as grounds to do mass layoffs. There's no precedent for that. It just doesn't, there isn't anything there that you can use for it. But the president can still order agencies, to look within their agency and to develop RIF plans. So that can all still happen. It'll all get challenged in court. And, it'll probably get appealed and then it'll get appealed again. And then it'll go to the Supreme Court and a ruling will be made. And at that time, everybody will be out of a job. So it won't really matter. Now, what was so startling about the OMB memo is up to 700,000 people. You could have hundreds of thousands of people that could be potentially receive a RIF notice. Now, I think it's an overwhelming threat. I don't see it being practical to actually do that. I can't envision a scenario where you have already lost over 300,000 people in the federal workforce and you have federal agencies kindly asking people to come back to work and rescinding layoff notices. And now you're threatening to do hundreds of thousands more. It doesn't make any sense. I think it's just a negotiation technique. That's my take on it anyway. Yeah. Yang agrees with me. Okay. What else? All right. Do we have anything else? A lot of these are statements. Maybe if you have a question, you could put a big old Q so I don't waste that much time and I can get straight to your question. Okay. Will Rich, will the direct hires be on hold during a government shutdown? Yeah, typically most government hiring would be paused. Now, if it's a certain type of position, like if they're trying to get more people in ICE or CBP, or they're trying to get Border Patrol staffed up, there's ways around that. But generally speaking, most other hiring would be paused until until the government is funded, or a CR passes, a continuing resolution passes. Oh, what is this? We got a super chat. Super chat, mad veteran, $100. My God. Hey, I appreciate you, mad veteran. Just info: Title 38 and Title 38 hybrid positions will not be held to the 2-page maximum. Keep up the good work, Armand. Hey, I appreciate you a ton. Thank you so much for that. I think that was my biggest super chat ever. So I appreciate you. Let's see. Okay. We got any other questions? Okay, let's jump back, see if I got anything else that we have from previously submitted. Um, FAA. FAA should still be hiring especially air traffic controllers. Let's see. Art of the deal. Art of the deal tactic, extreme moves to get what you want. Yeah. And then, kind of really the persona of President Trump has been the deal maker, the person that can fix it. That's how he appeals to his base. Is he's the guy who can fix it, he can get it done, he can solve it within 24 hours, he can solve it for 48 hours. So it's really alarming to see kind of a nonchalant attitude. Like, if it shuts down, it shuts down. I'm gonna go play some golf. Get out of my face. If it shuts down, it shuts down. And he is credited for the longest shutdown in government history. 2018, 35 days shut down, and that impacted contractors. That impacted contractors at a lot of companies. So I mean, it's not good for anyone. We got another super chat. The Standing Bear, $20. Thank you so much. Morning, Armand. As we come closer to a shutdown, I haven't heard anything as a DHS essential employee about how it affects us. No guidance. Is this a good sign? Thanks. No, I don't think that's a good guidance, but it's very typical across many agencies. In some agencies, they haven't even identified who is the essential worker. So people don't even know if they're going to have to keep coming into work after Tuesday midnight. Tuesday midnight gets here, there's no deal, there's no CR. Who's coming in on a Wednesday? So people they're waiting on text messages, they're waiting on emails, and then there's guidance coming out that if it does shut down, your computer goes off. You don't check your email. You're not supposed to do anything. You're completely hands off until somebody sends you that text message. Um, what we know at this point is you have the top 2 Democrat lawmakers, you have the top 2 Republican lawmakers. They're all meeting with President Trump tomorrow. They're all going to sit down in the same room together, and they're going to try to work out a deal. And outside of that, it looks really uncertain on what's going to happen. But the worst case scenario of the government shutting down and having mass reduction in forces, I don't see that. The way that the OMB letter is written, I don't see anything close to that coming into fruition. I do think it is yet another tactic. A lot of people are in the camp that the government's not going to shut down. Maybe they can work out a deal on Monday. And by work out a deal, what that means is the Democrats are going to have to let go of the Affordable Care Act premium subsidies. They're just going to have to let it go. If they don't let it go, the government's going to shut down, because I don't think the attitude on the right with the Republicans, they don't feel like they have to make concessions because they have the majority. They have the president, they have the Senate, they have the House. They don't feel like they should have to make concessions. They didn't do it in March. They're not going to want to do it now. You need 7 Democrats. You need 7 Democrats to come along with the Republicans. And I think 2 or 3 have already gave indications that they might break free of Chuck Schumer and go with the Republicans. So that just leaves probably 4 or 5 more Democrats between now and Tuesday at midnight. Can they get that? A lot of people don't want to see it shut down, but yeah, we just don't know. All right. Let's see. So this question right here from Sir Geo, what would be the probability of Congress passing a continuing resolution or final budget by September 30th and raising budget for certain agencies such as TSA and VA? So if you look at Polymarket, it says the likelihood of a government shutdown is 70%. So most people think, and then I think it goes all the way up to 77% in some situations. So it's highly likely, the market is feeling that it's highly likely the government will shut down. The likelihood of a final budget, I don't see that at all. I think that's 0%. CR is what we're looking at. We're looking at a continuing resolution. Republicans want it to go out 7 weeks. That's probably somewhat realistic. Raising budgets for TSA. No, TSA is like on the naughty list. The Trump administration doesn't really like TSA. They want to replace them completely with the private sector. VA maybe, but probably not. No, VA maybe. VA maybe. VA maybe. Um, but yeah, especially when it comes to the budget for the budget allocations for medical professionals, they're having issues right now. The VA is having issues retaining nurses and doctors and quality medical professionals because even though they're not subject to any of this madness, they're not really subjected to the rifts. They're not subjected to the deferred resignation program. It's just the climate and the atmosphere and the culture in the administration that's forcing that a lot of medical professionals that have a ton of options, they can easily go work in the private sector in the same state and get comparable wages. I mean, they're not going to be earning a pension. That's probably the only downside is you wouldn't be earning a pension, but some of these people are already fully vested. It takes 5 years, you're fully vested. You could jump in the private sector for a few years, wait out the Trump administration, and then jump back in depending on who the president is in 2028. So, they could be thinking that, but there's a problem with that. So, could be. Let's see. What is this one? We got, I am scheduled to begin my new position with entry on duty of October 19th. If a government shutdown occurs before that date, will it affect my timing of my internal move? Yeah, man, you got to ask HR that question. But a government shutdown could impact that. It could impact that because if that office that you're going to, if it's not getting funded and no one is supposed to be working there, that means you too. You're not supposed to be working there. So first thing is I'd probably contact HR, the one that extended the job offer, and clarify that, and then probably ask your new supervisor to the office that you're heading to. Ask them that question: is this office funded? By what means are we funded? Is this going to impact us? Do we still have money to continue operations? So you have to ask those questions. I don't know, but it could. So those questions should be asked. I'd ask them tomorrow. Yeah, Project 2025 is the center of these issues. Anyone who voted for Trump either knowingly or unknowingly supported Project 2025. Yeah, so Project 2025 is a big one. A lot of people, so Project 2025 had things in there that haven't happened yet, like the national ban on abortion. That's not, I don't think that's going to happen at all. But it was worse in a lot of situations. When you look at the federal workforce and what was done to the federal workforce, it was worse in the fact that it was chaotic and it was deep. The cuts were deep. So, and it's for those reasons that during campaigns, President Trump tried to distance himself as much as possible from Project 2025, even so much to say, I've never read it. He said he didn't read it in order to have deniability. Like, I don't know what's in there. I don't want to read it. And that was very intentional because he didn't want to be criticized. He didn't want to have to debate the policies that were in Project 2025, even though the same people that wrote it, he put in positions of power. So it's evident that it's playing a huge role this year, and it will continue to play a huge role throughout his administration. Next question. If a continuing resolution passes, do you think the odds of the hiring freeze ends on the 15th of October increase? So check this out. I am still in the camp of believing the hiring freeze is going to be lifted. So I shared an interview with OPM, the director of OPM, which is Scott. I'm going to go ahead and put it up there. He was asked about that, and he did not mention like, oh, the hiring freeze is going to be extended. That was a good opportunity to talk about it, but he didn't mention it. Let me see if I can show it on screen again. Okay. So let me do that. Let me do this. So this interview happened 2 days ago. Here he is. This is with Bloomberg. And the first question is, what will hiring of the government look like after the hiring freeze ends in a couple of weeks? So at this point, he could have said, well, we don't know. We'll have to wait to see how that looks like. We got to wait to get word from the Trump administration on where he wants to go. But the first four letters out of his mouth were, we want to hire. So yeah, they want to hire. They want to hire positions, national security, public safety. These positions are already exempted from the hiring freeze. But then he shifts it to performance management. But I believe Scott, the director of OPM, he thinks that it's going to end in a couple of weeks. I think that it's going to end in a couple of weeks. But you still have people who think that it's going to be all calendar year. There's some people think that it's going to be frozen for over a year, which would be insane. But we'll know more. In just a couple of weeks, we'll know more. Oh yeah, I answered this question a little bit earlier. So why are there not many jobs on the usajobs.gov platform? Yeah, all the jobs are gone. A week ago, there was over 7,000 jobs open to the public. Today, there's 293. It's an over 90% drop in all job announcements on the platform. And the reason for that, the official reason, is all the job announcements were directed to be removed so that they could be consistent with the two-page resume format, with the two-page resume language, and also with the 4 essay questions. There's also some stuff happening on the back end where they're trying to streamline it and make it more efficient. Now, what does that mean exactly? Nobody knows, but they're trying to make it more efficient so that if the application was going to like multiple locations, like to the agency's office, and it was bouncing around too much, they wanted to cut. So it goes from point A to point B and doesn't go anywhere else. So they're trying to make it a little bit more efficient, supposedly, allegedly, and they want to standardize the way that the job announcements are appearing on there when it comes to the language in the job announcement. So that's the reason why. And I think, there's a lot of job announcements that should have been closed a long time ago, and they're still up there. So this is an opportunity also to get rid of some of the junk that happens to be on there and to start anew. Now, a lot of people are suspicious because I don't remember this ever happening. I've been looking at usajobs.gov for probably over a decade. I don't remember this ever happening. So to see such a huge drop in job announcements, I think they're preparing for starting the new fiscal year. Certainly when it gets closer to October 15th, October 16th, we should start seeing the job announcements back on there. And if the hiring freeze is ultimately lifted in October, you can see a doubling of what was on there previously. So there should be at least 14,000 open jobs, I would say, for open to the public, and over 20,000 for federal employees. That would bring us up closer to the normal level. It would still be low, but it would be closer to normal. And then we're going to see the agencies take their administrative positions that they're trying to fill, because the workload on the rest of the workforce has been crippling in a lot of situations. You have one person doing the job of 3. They're going to take administrative positions and they're going to tie it to one of the exemption categories: public safety, national security, immigration enforcement, law enforcement, or the VA, medical. They're going to tie it to something so that they can hire 0343, so they can hire 0301, 0343s, 0346, 0340 program management, positions like that are needed. That's essentially the backbone of all federal agencies. You need a strong core to do the administrative function to keep the agency running. Same thing with 0200, human resources. You need strong human resource offices so that you can navigate that agency, whether you're trying to ramp up or ramp down. Doesn't matter what you're trying to do. You need those people in there. And right now, there's no exemption for them. So you have to tie it to one of the previously identified exemptions. You have to tie it to one of those, right? Okay, let's see what else we got. DOD, we got an update from DOD from the number 13 itself. They're doing cuts at the Department of War. They are simply changing jobs from funded to unfunded and designating those employees as surplus. 10% of people, regardless of the program and the clearance, were told to leave. Told to leave as in RIF notice? They received RIF notices? Is that what you're saying? Can you say what office or what sub-agency within the DOD or DOW? Interesting. Um, let's see what else we got. Yeah. So just too fresh. The four essay questions, they're pretty much the same. They're listed on the questionnaire, so you don't have to attach a document. You just have to answer the questionnaire like you would normally do. And then you will find them in the middle or towards the end. It'll have the four questions. There'll be an empty text box. You just type it in. You're supposed to have a 200 word limit, but for every agency is asking you, but it's asking you based on your personal background. So what you did while you were at your last job, your experience, like give us an example on when you've been efficient or effective in your last position, and how are you going to bring it to this new agency. So you're going to tell your little story. It should be on your resume. You should have a bullet on your resume that talks about how you were effective or efficient doing a task. And essentially that's what they want for one of them. You're going to have to mention your favorite executive order, which can be, what is it? Increasing efficiency in the federal workforce. That's an executive order. Pick that one. Or scaling AI. Or what is it? It's like leadership AI or something like that. You can pick that one also. Pick one of those. And then the last one is about work ethic. So you're going to tell your story about how you have proven work ethic and what you were able to accomplish with it. Now, once again, these are optional, but I would do it. I would fill it out. Um, what is that? Yeah. HR said they took off the jobs to cooperate with the two-page resume, and all jobs will be reposted tomorrow. So yeah, they've been dwindling down. I think they pretty much all came off on Friday. So we'll see if they're back on Monday. But that was the main reason. It was for the two-page limit and standardizing job announcements across USA jobs. And if anyone here is interested in getting a federal government job, make sure you put it into that two-page format. Whether it's resume builder, whether it's your own personal resume, you want to get to that two-page format. And as far as the jobs that are being prioritized, we just heard the OPM director say he wants to hire more. If you see a hiring event taking place, and if you go on usajobs.gov and you click events, you can see some of the hiring events coming up, or you can sign up to the free newsletter down below. And I push out hiring events every Thursday. Every single Thursday, I push out the latest hiring events. So you can sign up to that newsletter. But regardless, what we're seeing there is you're seeing Bureau of Prisons, they're doing a lot of hiring events. You're seeing Department of Homeland Security, Customs and Border Protection, they're doing hiring events. There's actually some for the IRS, which really they're trying to hire thousands of seasonal employees. That's what's going on over there. They're getting people excited, but they're not even going to give them full benefits. Seasonal employees, and they're paying them very little. But there were like 3 or 4 hiring events for that, for the contact representative job. So you could see that out there as well. But outside of those main ones, I think USPTO is trying to hire some engineers. They're always trying to hire engineers. But outside of that, you didn't really see too much. You didn't see, really anything from the agencies that don't get any attention, like the EPA. Of course, education is not going to hire anything. HUD's not going to hire anything. GSA is trying not to hire any. They're trying to get people that they fired, or not fired, that they laid off back into the agency. But, at some point they might have to start hiring. Department of Interior recently announced that they were going to fire about 7,000, I think over 7,000 more people, the Department of Interior. But then last week, if you look on usajobs.gov, all the positions that they're hiring for are park rangers. They're hiring for correction workers. It's the usual ones. It's the usual positions that they're trying to hire for. So anybody really interested in law enforcement, I would say this is probably the year. This is the year of law enforcement, because there's a big push, and not just in, 1 or 2 agencies. It's like all agencies that have law enforcement positions, to include the VA. The VA has some police officer positions. Department of Interior has some. There's a big push for that. Let's see, what else do we have? We got anything else? Yeah, so Preppy Princess, how soon after the hiring freeze do you recommend it's best to look for job opportunities? I would say immediately. Immediately. Right now, less people are applying. And it's not any mystery. It's not like something that's super confusing. You know why. We both know why less people are applying this year. But With less people applying, that could mean potentially a little bit less competition. The VA mentioned that in 2025, they're seeing 40% less applicants. Now, the VA is one of the agencies that's hiring full force. It's like 80% of their positions they're hiring. So it's not like they're hiring any less, and that's why people aren't applying. People are not applying because of the political climate, because they've heard from their friend or their family member or the news. They've heard that it's a rough time to be a federal worker, and a lot of them are being cut or squeezed out. That's why they're not applying. So there's less people applying. You can use that to your benefit if you're willing, to roll the dice, to take the risk. You can do that. I would look right now, ask yourself, where are your skills and abilities? Where is your experience at? What job series are you eligible for? Are you an analyst? Are you an IT person? Are you a finance person? Are you a law enforcement person? Are you an instructor? Are you in education? Find out your job series and then look at the opportunities on there. And I guarantee you that those opportunities probably have less applicants than this time last year. This time last year, more people were applying in general. The hiring freeze lifts, let's say middle of October, here in about 2.5 weeks. If it lifts, it provides more opportunities. You should apply for what you're qualified for. Okay. Let's see what else. What is this? Okay, we have GSD by the sea. How is GSA able to not follow the RIF rules and guidelines in their RIF rescission letters by not going in ranking of the RIF registries for rescission letters? Yeah, I don't know. Are you saying that they didn't have retention registers? Are you saying that the GSA was not using retention registers when they were conducting their reduction in force? I've seen a lot of cases where have been no retention registers, and there should be. You should be looking at individuals based on years of service, based on performance, based on tenure, based on veterans' preference. It should be happening. And if it's not happening, you should be able to appeal through the MSPB. But the MSPB is so backed up right now, it's very unlikely that you'll hear anything this year. Yeah, so Kazna, what are the chances we see more deferred resignation programs, particularly for DoD? For the Department of War, you could see it. Right now, you know that the Secretary, Pete Hegseth, he's called like all the generals, all the admirals. He's called them over to the Pentagon. He's meeting with all the general officers. A lot of people are like, what is he meeting them for? Some people are like, well, it's to clarify and to motivate the leaders to talk about warrior ethos and the direction the military needs to be heading in. Some people is like, well, maybe he's trying to cut some of these folks because he has stated he wants to cut 10% of general officers. So what is that? That's like 80 people out of 800. 80 of them he wants to cut. Is he talking about increased reduction in forces? It's possible. We don't know exactly what he's talking about because it's being kept. There's a lid on it right now, but we're going to know shortly, probably not too long. I would say sometime in the first half of this upcoming week, we're going to know what was talked about. We could hear more about that, about reductions. If they want to do more reductions, I think the way that they will go is the deferred resignation plan. I think that if you have two tools to use in your agency, if you're a leader in an organization and you have a RIF and you have a DRP, I think that the best one to go with to minimize any public scrutiny is to use the DRP. I think DRP should be used first. And then if the DRP does not do the trick, if it's not effective in reaching your goal, then you use the RIF. That's the way it should be done. That's the way, just from an optic perspective on people watching you, that's kind of what you want to do. So if the Department of War identifies that they need to lose more people and they're trying to shrink more, yeah, there could be another one. I imagine there could be a couple of them, 2 or 3 more deferred resignation programs throughout the year 2026 is very possible, especially in certain agencies that they want to squeeze even further. Department of War is so big. That's why I think that it's kind of hard to get your arms around that thing and to understand what you have there because it's so large. It accounts for like over 30% of all federal workers, all federal employees. All right, let's see what else we got. Um, okay, I think we're good. You guys got any more questions for me? That OPM, I would encourage you to go look at that OPM director interview because it's really telling on what that person's thinking, what Scott is thinking in the direction of 2026 and what's going to happen with the federal workforce. The big things that he was asked was the return to office mandate. A lot of people are unhappy with that. There's still a lot of people upset about the return to office, hiring, the hiring freeze. He admits there's a tech talent problem. They cannot attract talented IT individuals. They have a problem attracting them. And he seems confused about that, but you and me know, you and me both know it's not that confusing. Hey, thanks for spending some of your Sunday with me. Let me know. You got any other questions I wasn't able to answer? Go ahead and drop a comment. This video will stay on the channel so you can watch it again if you want. If you want to know the best way to condense your resume, check out the last live stream that was done in August, and I walk you through that. So that could be a good resource for you. Let me know if there's anything else. You can always shoot me an email. You can schedule a call down below, whatever works best for you. Make sure you sign up to the free newsletter down below, and I will see you guys.